Well, hi, everybody. I've just lumped this next two topics together into GIS support for emergency management. And we think about GIS for emergency management. We know that GIS can be applied in a lot of different ways. And if we really think about emergency management in these four different phases: response, recovery, mitigation, and preparation, we can use GIS in the response phase for search and rescue and damage assessment. In the recovery phase, we can use it for tracking status and tracking resource deployment. In the mitigation phase, where we're really trying to minimize the impact of a similar situation, we can get involved in doing analysis and modeling. And then in the preparation phase, assisting with the planning. But in order to be able to do this, we need to understand how emergency management works. And for the GIS community to be able to insert themselves into this emergency management process, we need to understand how they operate. And that's called the incident command system. We need to know how emergency management and first responders operate. And they operate in this structure called ICS, Incident Command Systems. It's really composed of these 5 different sections. You have command, which is in charge of the overall organization. And then you have 4 sections underneath that: finance, logistics, operations, and planning, which, if you look at the first letter of each one, the acronym that's used is CFLOP. It's an easy way to remember: command, finance, logistics, operations, and planning. So where's GIS in this incident command system? Well, we're in the planning section. If we take a look at that, break the planning section down, you have a planning chief. Each section has a chief. Under the planning chief, you have these 4 units: a resource unit, a situation unit, documentation unit, and a demobilization unit. You look at the documentation for a situation unit. Situation unit is responsible for determining information needs, gather, analyze, evaluate incident information, prepare and display incident information, provide mapping, there we are, predictive and risk assessment services, and then submit reports and documentation. So now we know where we lie, someplace in the situation unit under the planning section. And we can likely end up someplace else. You may be providing some GIS services in the field or training or something like that. But ultimately, the best place for sure for GIS to be is in the planning section. And it really, if you think about, if you do some further research on what the planning section is all about and ICS, you'll see that that's a pretty good fit. So to learn more about this, FEMA has something called the Emergency Management Institute, and in there they have online an ICS Resource Center and 2 training classes: ICS or IS 700 NIMS, which is the National Incident Management System, an introduction, and ICS 100, an introduction to the Incident Command System. These are at a minimum 2 classes that everybody that expects to provide GIS for emergency management response should take. And in fact, if you're wondering, well, who needs to be taking this, this is the guideline: all personnel with a direct role in emergency preparedness, incident management, or response. And that's likely all of you that are online right now. It's likely a majority of all public employees, whether you're at the local level, the city level, the county level, or the state level. You are ever going to get involved in any capacity in an emergency management or response role, you need to take these classes. And I've heard arguments that all public staff should take those 2 classes at a minimum. And then once you do that, now you're speaking a language that your emergency manager and first responders will understand. And you are able to help describe where GIS should fit within their overall structure. So the underlying message here is don't self-deploy. You can't just go knocking on the door in the Emergency Operations Center and say, hey, I got some maps you might want to look at. Too late. You need to build a relationship now before the actual event occurs. Work on that cycle. You're in the preparation phase now, and you can help by creating products and building the relationships so that you are able to provide GIS services. Okay, so then let's step back again and look at this cycle. Now we've got ICS, we know where we are in the incident command system. We should be able to get involved in these different phases of the the emergency management process. But right here, where that bar just came in, that's when an event occurs. And so what do we do then? Now we're talking about something that has occurred. We've got life and safety on the line. We need to be able to do what we can do with the least amount of resources as quickly and reliably as possible. We have all kinds of great technology that we can use that is best used in these phases for mitigation and preparation, where we have a lot of time on our hands. But when lives are on the line, we've got first responders going out in the field. We need to be able to do what we do best and easiest and most reliably, and that's maps. And it's really all about creating maps ahead of time, having a certain number of printed copies of these maps, and already have those in the hands of emergency managers and first responders, and then give them the training that they need so that they already have something that they can use while you get up to speed and are able to do some of the more advanced stuff. But you got to give them the basic stuff. This is a foundation that gets everything started. So with all the cool GIS stuff that we can do, it really gets down to a fundamental level of having maps strategically deployed and having resources that are going into the field and in the emergency operations center that know how to use those maps. Something that we can then use and replicate reliably. And then those maps need to include key resources, critical infrastructure, vulnerable population. These are the three categories of layers of information that first responders and emergency managers think about. We need to make sure that that stuff is all visible on those maps. So then we need to train first responders, emergency managers on how to use these maps. And so one of the first things with the map is that you have to have a spatial reference. You have to have some way of relating this to the world. And so we put grids on maps. And we then give people basic training on how to navigate using a map. And it's as simple as read, write, then up. Now you're describing a grid cell on the map at 7556, just using the grid labels. And now they can communicate over a radio or in a variety of different ways using this common language of location. And so whether it's a location that's being communicated from the field to the emergency operations center or vice versa, we're all using the same same thing. And so what coordinate system are we going to use? You know, we've got county coordinates and state plane coordinates and a variety of geographic coordinates, latitude, longitude, and so on. How do we know which one we're going to use? Well, there's a standard for that, and it's called the U.S. National Grid. U.S. National Grid has been a national standard since 2001. It's been adopted by several states, including the state of Minnesota back in 2009. It is, in fact, the military grid referencing system that's been adopted for civilian use. So this means that when we engage military resources such as the National Guard, they know how to use this. So now we're interoperable with federal resources. FEMA uses the U.S. National Grid as well. And then at a local level, if adjacent jurisdictions are all using the same grid referencing system, they will be interoperable as well. So as soon as you start engaging mutual aid agreements and things like that, we're all speaking the same languages. It's important to establish this again before the event occurs, or people are just going to be making stuff up. And then you get a lot of confusion, a lot of different variations in what people are using to describe locations. So it's important to learn about U.S. National Grid. As I showed on that map, it's as simple as teaching people to pay attention to the numbers that are around the margin, read, write, then up, and now you're describing locations. And you can go beyond that, not just describing a square at 1 to 24,000, but being able to describe a location to a higher precision of 100 meters or 10 meters or 1 meter. And that's what it's really all about. This is really nothing more than UTM. The grids that we put on the maps are a UTM grid. And then the convention gives you a way of using UTM coordinates in a convenient notation. And so you eliminate a lot of the extra digits that are not necessary. The number of digits that you provide also can convey the precision of your location and so on. But this is nothing new. This has been around for a very long time. UTM covers the entire planet, so we don't have to worry about running into boundaries. It conforms to commonly accepted mapping practices and projections. So we don't have to teach anybody all the details of map projections and so on. We simply rely on the coordinates and using UTM projections. So it's very straightforward. The important thing is that we all agree on the same thing and we all do it the same way. And why do we need that? Well, we can use addresses and we can use a variety of different techniques for navigating through our communities, but we get a situation like this where we have nothing but a continuous debris field and you don't recognize street signs, you can't see addresses. And so how do we make sense out of this mess? Well, by applying a grid and using GPS, we can now superimpose coordinates on top of this debris field. And then that coupled with maps, simple GPS devices, whether it's a smartphone using a GPS app like GridNav, and then on the maps, again, having the key resources, vulnerable population, and critical infrastructure on those maps. Search and rescue teams, for example, are able to navigate through this kind of a debris field and be able to record their progress as they go through that. And they can simply go through watching GPS. They know that they're working within a 10-meter square. Once they've cleared that 10-meter square, they can check it off on their map and be able to turn these back in to the Emergency Operations Center, something like that. Now, I know got GIS folks on the line here, and we know we've got apps for doing damage assessment, and we can certainly do a lot with field applications and things like that. That's all great. We're talking about a lowest common denominator. When all else fails, we can print maps and be able to hand those out to volunteers and who knows what that may not have access to the simplest technology. And then, of course, we also know that cell networks can go down, internet cannot be available, things like that. So be prepared with the lowest common denominator, having some printed maps already available so that you're able to start working, even if you don't have the technology available, and you can build up from there. So again, thinking about these maps now, so it's pretty easy to make these maps, and the maps that I'm showing here are a couple of map series that we've developed. One on the right here is about 22 inches by 24 inches, and it's at 1/24,000 scale. And it is based on the even 10,000 meter increments of UTM, which is a 10-kilometer square in US National Grid. And then the smaller maps, these are 8.5 by 11, 1 inch equals 600 feet, or 1 inch is 500 feet, 1 to 6,000 scale. These represent the 1 kilometer square, 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters. So now what you have, each of the 8.5 by 11 maps is a larger scale for each of the squares on the larger or small scale map. And so if you think about using two different scales, one works well when you're in a controlled setting like in the Emergency Operations Center, and then the other maps work well to be able to hand out to resources that are deployed in the field. And these are also all created as PDF maps, and in fact, they're created as GeoPDF maps. So you can use something like the Avenza PDF Maps app and be able to put those PDF maps right on the smartphone and be able to then track your location on the map itself. You don't need cell service to be able to do that. Once you have the map loaded on your phone, you don't need cell service for GPS. You still have the satellites above. And so that's an interesting approach. Plus, these maps are all transportable. We create all the maps. We print a strategic number of copies and have those available so we can at least work off of the paper, but then make sure you have the PDF maps available as well. And now what you're able to do is be able to walk into any place that has power and a laptop, be able to plug in your thumb drive and have access to the maps. You don't got to worry about your database, don't got to worry about internet, don't got to worry about your network. You can work completely standalone. Again, think about a foundation and working your way up from there. And this is pretty basic. And then you can create map books. So you can have PDF map books. So these are all set up as a multi-page PDF file. We've created map books for each of our cities. And then those, again, can also be on a thumb drive ready to go. So nice working with these PDF maps and map books. You can automate the production. The US National Grid works well as a foundation for creating these maps. You can use ArcGIS data-driven pages, ArcGIS Pro map series. You can do Python scripting with it, creating map libraries that are transportable, standalone. You can print what you need, and anybody can do it. You don't need to be a GIS expert to be able to print off the maps that you need from a thumb drive. They just need to understand some basics about your file naming convention. And then you think about these maps, you may need to put multiple maps together. Well, you have the printed maps. It's pretty easy. Take two maps, put them together and make a wall map. Also, if you don't have your own maps, you can use the USGS US Topo series. So once again, the same thing. These are all US National Grid compliant. They all have UTM grids on them. You can use them the exact same way. And the same thing applies. So I can take 4 of these maps and put them together very easily to make a wall map. So now I've got the overview of my entire area of operation, and I can stick it up on the wall. And I don't have to do it. Anybody in the Emergency Operations Center can do it once they know that these maps are available. And there are a variety of mobile apps available that support the US National Grid. Just go look for the GPS apps. It may be, maybe use MGRS or USNG keywords. They're all out there. And you may have to set a setting in the GPS app or something like that, but they're all out there. Take your pick. So in summary, develop a relationship with your emergency manager and first responders before the disaster. Do it now. Start as soon as you can. It's going to be an ongoing effort, but they need to know who you are and they need to know what you can do. Take the NIMS and ICS training so you can speak their language and tell them where you fit in their emergency command structure. And then make maps ahead of time with UTM grids on them. Please don't put your county coordinates on your maps. Nobody else knows what that is. It has to be something that's universal. And then teach map reading and land navigation with the US National Grid to emergency managers and first responders. It's very simple. And you're really just teaching basic map reading and land navigation skills to these folks to give them a resource that they can use. And if you don't do that, they're going to make something up, and they're probably going to use something like latitude, longitude, and their people are going to get confused because they don't know how many decimal places to use, or if it's degrees, minutes, seconds, decimal minutes, who knows? It'll be a mess. So this is a door opener for you as a GIS professional to have conversations with your emergency managers and first responders and help them understand, and then you can build up from there. So start with the basics and work your way up.